Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. Created by speakers for speakers. It's your fast track to sharper skills, bigger impact, and a smarter speaking business. Subscribe and download using the link below. And step into the spotlight.
Hello and welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association, where we share ideas to help professional speakers become better speakers, build better businesses, and form relationships with other speakers. My name is Kate Donovan, and I am a burnout speaker, and I am one of your hosts of Speakernomics. Our guest for today is Owen Fitzpatrick. Owen is a social psychologist, keynote speaker, and author of Inner Propaganda. For over 2 decades, he's studied how beliefs form and change in boardrooms, in conflict zones like North Korea and Rwanda, and under personal crisis. He's delivered keynotes for Google, LinkedIn, Pfizer, and Coca-Cola, and was rated the most engaging speaker by 10,000 attendees across 2 consecutive Forum 1 events. He's spoken to audiences in 33 countries and traveled to over 100. He's also written 10 books translated into 21 languages. Today, Owen is opening up his playbook on making your speaking business better. He's going to break down consultative selling so you can stop pitching your keynote and start understanding the problem you're actually solving for your buyer. He'll get into the art of storytelling that grabs and keeps an audience, pulled from a mix of neuroscience and Hollywood, because why not? And most of all, he's going to teach you how to cultivate real belief in a room, not just interest. So grab your pen, your paper, your favorite note-taking app, whatever you got, and listen up, because Owen is about to drop some gems today. Owen, welcome to Speakernomics.
Thank you so much, Kate. When you introduced yourself as a burnout speaker, I thought you said burnt out speaker. And I was like, join the club, Kate. I hear you.
Maybe I'll have to work on that for the next intro. Owen, I want to start with sales because I think every single speaker needs support with this. Almost everyone I know is constantly talking about lead gen and sales and getting our keynotes purchased. We've all felt the pressure of pitching our keynote, and gosh, that can get awkward. Walk us through what consultative selling actually means and how it changes the conversation.
For me, the most important strategy as a speaker that I use in order to sell is always through the process of questions. So consultative selling is consulting with the folks that you're trying to sell to by asking them the questions to understand exactly what they want and what they need. And I think that so often as a speaker, we learn, okay, you need to have your elevator pitch. I'm Owen and I do this and I'm this type of speaker and I do that. And the problem is that most of the time they don't care. They only care about that after they figure out what is it that you can do for them. So whenever I work with it, or I'm having a conversation with a potential client and we jump on a call, my questions are what gets me to the place where I'm able to help them, because I'm able to ask them what problems that they have, what are the challenges, what are they looking for, what would the ideal ending be for this. If I was to walk out of the room afterwards, how would they know that it was a success? And the more that I can ask those questions, the more they'll share exactly what I need to know so that I can make it work. And I think a lot of times we, as speakers, it's very easy for us to have our, let's say, inverted commas, spiel. We know what we're going to talk about. We know the speech that we're going to use. But if we don't listen and pay attention to what their specific needs are, then our speech is never going to resonate enough. And for me, I want to know as much as I can. I've worked with clients that, were experts in terms of makeup and, beer and areas that I've absolutely zero knowledge about. And I had to spend a lot of time trying to understand it. But when you go that extra mile and you do your research and you listen to what they have to say and you ask more deeper type of questions, which is what consultative selling is all about, you try to dig into what not just their problems, but their pain points, their priorities, trying to understand what matters most there. The more you get that, the more you understand exactly how to adjust or tweak your presentation to the point that it fits. So that a lot of times, like I heard at the end of a recent event, the CEO of the firm, I was chatting to him afterwards and he said, you really listen. I said, what do you mean? He goes, we've got a lot of speakers in the past and they go up and they do a good stuff. They, what he called the dog and pony show. But he goes, you really heard everything we said and all the prep calls. You incorporated so much into it. And that was really impressive for him because, again, remember, they're not looking around going, we need a great speaker. They're looking around going, we need a great speaker on this because this is what our problem is. And that's what questions do. Also, I hate talking about myself. So the more that I'm talking about them and plugging that in, they can read my bio. Okay, I'll give them a couple of sentences when I'm on the call. But my job is not to sell me. My job is to help them to solve the problem they have. And as long as I remember that, the answer is in the questions.
Okay, so for people who are maybe new to this, there's some people that are like, oh, great, I'm asking questions, I'm digging in, I'm totally on this. There are people that are like, what questions should I be asking? So if you had to give us your top 3 favorite questions that you ask a client when you're on a sales call, what might they be?
So the first one is what I already kind of teased there, which is what would need to happen for you to be 100% happy as a result of this particular presentation? Another one in the same vein as that could be, what is it you want people walking away with it from a mindset point of view, from a behavioral point of view, from a skill point of view? What I also like to ask sometimes, depending on the conversation, a little bit further along the line, is what have you not been happy with in the past when hiring speakers? So that helps me to know what it is to watch out for. What is the most important thing out of everything that you want these people to be feeling as a result of this presentation? I know I'm giving you more than 3 here, but I'll give you one more, and that is, out of everything, what is the belief that you would want every single person walking away believing as a direct result of my presentation? And that also is kind of particularly relevant to me because I work on beliefs, but I think it's good for any speaker, because your goal as a speaker is not just to speak, it's to change, it's to create a change, to inspire, to transform, to make an impact. And so if you don't know what you're trying to make an impact on, or what's the most important for their perspective as to what to make the most impact on, then you're really flying blind. What you really want is to understand, this is the belief, this is the big idea that they want to get their people to believe. So how can I incorporate that in as a core message in what I'm presenting about?
All right. So, folks, if you are listening and you're paying attention, what would need to happen for you to be 100% happy with the result of this presentation? What do you want people to walk away with? What have you not been happy in the past with when you've hired other speakers? What's the most important thing you want your participants to be feeling when this wraps up? And out of everything, what is the belief you want everyone believing as a direct result of my work? Write those down, press pause, go back a few seconds, listen in again, get them down. You might want to change them a little bit for your people, right? You might want to make sure that they align with the person that you're speaking to, but this is a really great way to get you started.
And just to add one tweak to it, it's not just what they're walking away with, but I always like to prompt that a bit. So it's like, what are they walking away with regards to their mindset, with regards to the behaviors, with regards to the skills, right? Because those are 3 separate things. You want to, the behaviors are the habits you want them to do regularly. The skills are what they need to get better at. And then the mindset is the way in which they need to approach things. So it's just that small little tweak to that question. What are they walking away with?
I couldn't type that fast, folks.
That's okay. You're doing great.
The next question I have for you today, Owen, is you have this really unique background and this combo of neuroscience and Hollywood, which is so fun. How does that inform the art of telling stories for you, like stories that actually grab an audience and keep them?
Well, I like to say I'm obsessed with story, and that's because I use a acronym called OCD to be able to describe the 3 neurochemicals that are involved in terms of storytelling. The first is oxytocin. And oxytocin is a chemical that's connected to pretty much, it's known as the love hormone, the cuddle chemical, the trust hormone, but it's fundamentally a chemical that causes us to feel a sense of bonding with others. And whenever you tell a story, the most important thing that you need to start with is grabbing the attention of the audience so that they genuinely care about what happens to the person. So they have to align themselves with the protagonist. So whenever you share a story, the story should be set up so that whoever you're telling the story about is someone that the audience can identify with. So it should be something that the audience says, oh, I can relate to that. And it doesn't mean that the audience, if you're telling a story about an astronaut, right, it doesn't mean that the audience has to go, well, I've always wanted to be an astronaut. It could simply mean that you're connecting with someone that has a goal, like they've always wanted to be an astronaut. Everything about them has wanted to be an astronaut. And yet they're finding that this one difficulty is preventing them from doing it. As soon as we have a character with a goal and a difficulty preventing them, that's what triggers the release of oxytocin, because now we go, I know what it's like to want something and not to be able to get it. Therefore, they're connected in. And once you've got oxytocin, now you've got their attention. The second is cortisol. And this is to do with the chemical that a lot of people hear about, the stress hormone, but it's a necessary chemical. It's released every morning when we wake up, a few minutes after we wake up. And it's an important chemical. The problem is when it's overwhelmingly in lots of situations in our life that we trigger cortisol, that becomes problematic. And so cortisol is whenever something goes wrong in your story. And it's great because when something goes wrong, it creates cortisol, which gets your attention. Cortisol creates attention grabbers. So whenever you're telling a story, if nothing goes wrong, if you're like, I worked with this client and they wanted to be happier and I did all of these amazing things and made them happier and now they're so super, or I worked with this couple and they fell in love because I worked with them and they're like so happy and everything's great. Well, no one cares about those stories. Those stories are boring. You want tragedy, you want danger, you want adversity, you want things to go wrong for a story to be great. The best stories out there are the ones that had high levels of cortisol in them, because the cortisol makes you go, I want to know what happens next. That's why MacGyver back in the day was amazing. Why 24, it was like the most addictive form of storytelling ever, because at the end of each episode, something bad happened to Jack Bauer, right? The nuclear bomb was about to explode every single episode. And you're still like, I wonder if it'll explode this time, right? You're still tuned into the next one. You can't stop tuning in. So that's the cortisol piece. And this links directly with dopamine, which is the motivation molecule to do with rewards, anticipation of rewards. And this is, we want to know what happens, but we're expecting, every time we focus on the goal of the character, every time things go right, our brain releases dopamine. So this cortisol dopamine sort of loop keeps us driving forward. And so as a speaker, when you're telling the story, the goal is to ensure that in the story, you connect them with the main protagonist for the oxytocin. And then through that story, there's going to be ups, dopamine, and downs, cortisol. And that's what keeps the story engaging. If you spend too much time and you're like just bumming people out for the whole time about a tragic story, that's cortisol dump, and that doesn't work. If you spend time just talking about how amazing things is, that's just dopamine, but it's not enough. What we need is that up and down. And that basically means turning points. It means situations in your story that things are good and things are bad. And I'll give you one other strategy, and this is more from screenwriting and Hollywood than anything else. And that is the specificity. And this is something I've noted specifically with speakers, specificity in story. If I turn around and you say, tell me a story, Owen, and I go, well, when I was 17, I got into speaking, and then I got in when I was 20, and then that's my life story. It's not really a story. It's certainly not a good story to tell. What you want is specificity. You want a moment when you're sitting down in your pajamas, looking at a TV set. You want a time where you're on a plane and all of a sudden this person says, you're in my seat. The more specific it is, the more real it is. The more real it is, the more powerful it is, and the more likely people are to relate to it. But when you give these like granular, like, let me tell you, back in like 10,000 years ago, like, we're not Yuval Noah Harari. We're not great at being able to take, thousands of years and compact it into a story that keeps us reading. And so what we need to do is be specific and go to the specific example. When we do that, we're going to get the attention, and this could be so much more impactful as a speaker. Lock into the smallest time. You were sitting in a cafe in Paris. You were sitting, like, one small specific example. That story will work wonders for you as a speaker.
All right. So for storytelling, we have BOCD, use oxytocin, cortisol, and dopamine through your storytelling, and be specific, if we're going to wrap it up real quick. The next question is something that I love digging into with you specifically. For those who don't know, Owen and I are friends in real life. So this is really fun that I get to interview him for Speakernomics. And this is something that I really enjoy about his work. You talk about cultivating belief in an audience, not just interest. What does it mean to cultivate belief in an audience? And how do we actually get an audience bought onto an idea that we want them to act on? So in the storytelling, you told us how to gain their interest, but then how do we get them to make that a belief in an action?
Beliefs are not necessarily factual, but they're functional. We don't just believe things because someone gives us the information as to something being true. We need to feel it, right? A belief is a feeling that feeling of certainty in an idea. It's an idea we feel certain about. And so as a speaker, I believe we need to become more what I call belief leaders. And it's an area that I sort of developed called belief leadership. It's the ability to cultivate and create belief in an idea, in a person, in a team, in a mission, in an organization, in a product, in a service. So when you're standing up there on stage, your job is not just to entertain the audience, to have a bit of fun. Your job is not just to give information. Let me tell you this information. If they want information, ChatGPT is going to give them information and probably give them lots of compliments and make them feel good while giving them the information. Now, the information might be completely wrong oftentimes, but still, it'll make them feel good while it gives them information. So we are not living in a world where people are going, I can't wait to see this keynote speaker to give me information. We're living in a world where they want to be impacted. They want to be transformed. They want to go along to your talk and walk out different. And that's the goal. I believe that should be the goal of every single keynote speaker, that the audience leaves and not going, oh, I thought he was interesting. If anyone ever tells me I'm interesting, it will kill my soul. I want them to walk away different as a result of it. So how do we do this? I believe fundamentally that in order, and this is the research I've done in my book, Inner Propaganda, I go into this in depth, but I believe that in order for us to change beliefs, or in order for us to cultivate belief, the idea, first of all, that we're trying to put across needs to feel right. It needs to fit in with the identity of the person that's listening. And only then do we make it make sense. So in other words, it's not like logically, I'll give you the reasons. Like if we're talking about burnout, for example, Kate, one of the reasons that you're so good at speaking on this topic is because you don't go in there just like spitting all of the data going, oh, let me tell you about a study in 2017 suggested that, like, that's not what you do. Instead, what you do is through the stories you tell, through the questions you ask, through your own state, you change the way people feel about burnout. You surprise us and give us counterintuitive ways of thinking about it. You know, you once talked about resentment as a superpower. And it's those ideas and those ways of thinking that transforms things, because people walk out of there and they go, I never thought about it like that before. And so for me as a speaker, our responsibility is to cultivate belief in our audience. We want them walking out, seeing the world differently as a result of us. And if we can change the way they feel so that they feel differently about a particular topic, they feel excited or motivated or inspired or determined as a result of that. If they then align it with who they are so that they can start to see themselves as the kind of person who has a different relationship to burnout from now on, then finally, they'll then be able to put together the techniques, the strategies, the suggestions that you had, because it fits in with who they are. But we all know that just giving them the information, well, thank you, that's information. They're never going to act on it unless it's aligned with who they are and unless it feels right. So to make it feel right, to make it fit in with who they are, and to make it make sense, we need to focus as keynote speakers on how can I create the right kinds of experiences for them through the stories I tell, through my own emotional state, through the questions I ask, through the interactions I have with them. How can I make them feel differently? How can I line it up with who they want to be? And when you do that, now all of a sudden you're cooking with gas. Now you're winning because you're doing what a speaker needs to do, which is creating belief in their audience so their audience walks away, as I said, transformed, different as a result of hearing you speak.
All right. And so belief leadership is driven by, it has to feel right, it has to fit in with who they are, and it has to make sense. I love it. Last question for today, sir. Before we go, I want to talk to you about inner propaganda at large. Not just the book itself, but a concept in the book that's particularly important for speakers. There are a lot of us out there that deal with this inner voice, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but fellow speakers, I've heard you backstage, so I doubt it. So many of us are dealing with this voice in our heads that's telling us we're not good enough, we're not ready. You know, we get off stage and we worry about if it wasn't perfect, did someone dislike me, what's going, we go through this sort of churn of emotions both before and after presentations and or programs and or speeches, workshops, whatever you want to call them. Talk to us about that inner voice and how we stop ourselves from comparing ourselves to everyone in the room who might be 15 years ahead of us, from feeling like we're not good enough, and so on.
Sure. So first of all, inner propaganda is the idea that we convince ourselves of particular beliefs, right? So it's not just that we have a negative inner voice or we have an inner critic. That never resonated enough for me, because it's not that I hear an inner critic and then I go, well, I can do a great job. And then the inner critic says, no, you're not. You're the most useless speaker we've ever seen. You're the worst. Everyone hates you. It's not like it's a conversation. It's whenever I feel like I've done terribly or whatever, my brain is like, okay, this is the reality. This is the truth. So when I say inner propaganda, I'm using that term on purpose. It's like there's an inner dictator that is deciding this is what happened. You absolutely embarrassed yourself up there on stage in that moment. And so whenever we experience anything, and usually I like to say that I feel bad in the right way now, as opposed to in the past. And I've learned to do that by recognizing that as soon as I start to fall into the trap of believing that this was the worst speech ever or I didn't do a good enough job, I immediately now I'm in a position where I go, I know the reason that my brain is thinking that is because I'm in the wrong mode, right? So I feel tired. I think me and you, Kate, have talked about it before, is that you've got the adrenaline dump and then that's gone. And all of a sudden now you're left. And, I've done this so many times. I mean, I've done thousands of speeches over the years in all sorts of places. And all of the times I still am very critical of myself. The difference is, and this is why I feel better about it, is because I've started to tell myself a new story based upon who I am, based upon what fits in for me. And that is, whenever I don't get the result that I want to, whenever I'm not as good as I want to be, my brain is going, I'm not as good as I want to be yet. Therefore, what are the lessons I need to learn so that I can get even better as a speaker? And so it becomes less of the problem. I don't see a problem with feeling bad when you don't feel you've done a good enough job. I feel the problem when you go, I haven't done enough good enough job. Therefore, I feel bad. Therefore, I'm not good enough or I'm not a good speaker. And I think it's just a useless thought. I'm not good enough. Okay, how does believing that work out for you? If you say I'm not good enough yet, it means, okay, I need to work on this. I need to learn. But this whole notion of I just don't have what it takes or I'm just not good enough, this is nonsense. This is our inner propaganda that is coming from our brain's desire to be able to keep things simple and to avoid danger, to avoid putting ourselves out there. But we're speakers. Literally, our job is putting ourselves out there on stage in front of people to talk for an hour and a half about the topic that we're talking to them about. So given that that's your job to put yourself out there, the most important thing to do is to go, this is a game that I got to keep working on. This is something until the day I die, and I hope I die on stage in front of people so I could traumatize everyone. But until the day I die, I want to keep getting better. But it doesn't mean that I'm as good as I want to be today. But if I'm really working hard at my craft, if I'm focusing on how I can keep getting better, if I can learn exactly what I reflect on, okay, what could I have done differently? If I watch tape of myself and try to continuously improve, then I know I'm going to keep moving towards it. And I want to keep improving as a speaker every day. And the whole inner propaganda of, you didn't do good enough there. Okay, cool. So what do I need to do the next time? Because I can't control the past. But what I can do is learn from it and adjust it and improve it. And that's what I call having the anti-fragile identity, where you know that every single negative experience, every single disappointment, every single setback, all of it serves to make you stronger, better, smarter, more capable, more expert, and a much better speaker. And to me, recognizing that means the inner propaganda is always going to be there. I'm never going to be in a place where my brain, and I think if you're one of those speakers that you speak and your brain's like, I killed it, I'm the greatest person in the world, everyone loves me, I just don't have a fault, I'm amazing. First of all, good for you. But second of all, I feel sorry for you in a way, because to me, one of the most important things for me is I know the better I get as a speaker, the more of an impact I make. And that's my goal, is to make much more of a difference. That's why I'm sure we're all in this industry, is to make an impact on the folks that we work with. And so that can be informed by realizing every time you don't get it as good as you want, learn from it, adapt it, tweak it, and just go out there the next time and keep trying to kill it every single time. To me, that's what fulfills me. And I think it's a more useful way of solving inner propaganda rather than the whole positive thinking. Oh, I'm amazing. I'm wonderful. I'm superb. And the audience throwing tomatoes at you, Have you ever had that, Kate? Have you ever had?
Yeah, I get tomatoes regularly.
Yeah, me too.
That's
me too.
a normal.
And I hate tomatoes as well. I don't even like them to eat. So it's a nightmare.
The whole concept of inner propaganda to me is interesting, especially the way that you talk about it, because essentially it's sort of like morally neutral. they're just stories. They're not good or bad stories. And I think when a lot of us think about propaganda, we think about the negative side, and it's easy to get caught up in that. But we also have good stories that we tell. And most of the time, when I hear you talk about it, what you're saying is like, let's just tell a pretty neutral version of the truth. I got on stage, I got decent feedback. There's some things I can work on. I would like to work on them to get better next time. And that becomes the story.
Yeah, I think I'd probably just tweak it slightly. I wouldn't see it as neutral. I would see it as useful, right? And
Yeah.
the reason I make that distinction is I'll often, like, when I give myself feedback in my own head, in my inner propaganda, I'll often, what works for me is I'll go, that I really nailed. I was really happy with that. That was pretty poor. That didn't work as well as I think it should have. That, so it's more nuanced, but I wouldn't call it neutral, because I do get excited about the pieces that I think I nailed, and I do get frustrated about the things that I don't. But it's that combination of feelings that's good. I mean, I like that. I want the cortisol and the dopamine of the particular experience as I reflect back on it, because the cortisol will push me to, like, it's like Jim Rohn said, it's the best day of your life, or the greatest day of your life, is the day where you felt the most disgusted at yourself. I'm totally paraphrasing it wrong, but he talks about the one of the most important ingredients for change is disgust. And so what I like to do is I like to reflect on the things that I want to improve on in the future. But I don't just, I'm not like totally twisting and going, oh my goodness, Owen, how do you look at yourself in the mirror after that? I also want the positive side. I want to be able to go, you killed it in there. And, more people should have laughed at that. That was a really good job. Like, I'm kind of trying to be my friend as well. And that's what I've learned over my own mental health struggles in the past. I've learned that ultimately speaking, when it comes down to it, what goes on in the inside of your head, it is going to be propaganda either way. But the way in which we become more aware of that, and that's what I wrote the book for, in a propaganda, is to help people understand this is why we believe what we do. This is neuroscience explanation, evolutionary psychology explanation, but this is why we believe what we do. This is how beliefs work, and this is how to change it. And to me, that's what I'm trying to do, is get that message out there. And I'm hopeful that this was useful and helpful to everyone.
And really, not only this is how it happens, but then this is how we can make our beliefs useful.
Yeah, because ultimately they're stories. And so the stories that you sell to yourself become the beliefs that you buy into. So the question that we have is, what do you believe about yourself as a speaker? How's that working for you? Not is it true? Because we can find evidence to show I'm useless, and we can find evidence to suggest I'm the greatest speaker in the world, right? We can find evidence to back up anything. Evidence and logical reasoning is overhyped. I'm not saying it's not important. It is, of course. It should be table stakes. But the problem is, once you feel differently about something, your brain will activate the ability you have to find out. Like, smart people can believe really dumb things because they're smart enough to form a really coherent argument to back up whatever it is that they want to believe. So for me, what I'm interested in doing is being able to recognize this at play, and to go, if I'm a speaker, instead of falling into the trap of going, okay, I'm either a terrible speaker or I'm an amazing speaker, instead I go, it doesn't really matter whether or not I think I'm this or that. What matters is, am I continuously getting better than I was before? And that's why I don't really fall into the comparison trap, right? Whenever I look at someone who's doing better than me, I ask myself, what makes them do better than me? What is it about them? And it's rarely a physical characteristic. More often than not, it's, maybe they're really good at explaining things in a different way. Maybe they're more relatable than me. Maybe they're well, I suppose this is physical. Maybe they're more attractive than me, although, obviously that's a tough call. But it's like, why are they doing better than me? Allows me to go, what can I learn from them? As opposed to, I'm not as good as Kate, or I'm not as good as Mike, or I'm not as good as whoever. Instead, I go, what is it that Kate does that's better than me? What is it that I do that's better than Kate? And that helps me to then go, how can I learn from that experience? How can I take from other speakers, as opposed to playing a comparison game that exists only in your head, and at the end of the day doesn't matter. And just because someone else gets selected doesn't mean they're a better speaker. It just means that they were selected for that. And maybe it means you need to work on your one sheet or your reel, or maybe it doesn't mean either of those. Maybe it just means that they were looking for someone with the other person's personality or demographic or topic or whatever. And the more we realize this, the more we understand, my goal is to improve and get better. And that means getting better in terms of building my business better, marketing myself better, promoting myself better, but most important of all, speaking better. And if you're constantly searching to do that, and you learn from the way other people market themselves, other people write, other people speak, then you're winning all the way, because now we are surrounded by information ecosystem that helps us to constantly get better, as opposed to wasting time going, how good am I? Am I as good as this person? It's a mute point. It means nothing, because it depends who you ask and it depends what context you're in. So for me, I'm like, how can I get better? Such a useful question, and a consultative question as well to boot.
All right, NSAers, let's recap your next steps on building a better speaking business according to Owen and his work on belief, leadership, and inner propaganda. Number 1, shift from selling your keynote to understanding the problem your audience actually needs solved by asking good questions. Number 2, master the art of the story. Blend neuroscience with screenwriting techniques to craft stories that grab attention and hold it with OCD. I love that. Number 3, learn to cultivate belief, not just interest. Move from thought leader to belief leader by making your idea feel true and getting your audience fully bought in. Number 4, watch your own inner propaganda. Notice how your brain convinces you that you're not good enough, and learn to manage that mindset so that you can create useful beliefs that drive your performance forward. All right, Owen, and as we wrap up, and just before we give people the wrap up of the show, where can people find more about your book, Inner Propaganda?
You can go to innerpropaganda.com and you'll find access to it there, and you'll be able to buy it there, and also get access to a free masterclass as well as a workbook. And I also am on owenfitzpatrick.com and on most social media platforms.
We want to know what you think of this episode. Do you like us? Do you love us? Do you hate us? Let us know. Leave us a rating, a comment, or a review on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. And one last hot tip. Maybe you could send this to somebody that you were thinking about while you were listening to this show. You might just help them create the next notch in their belt of becoming a better speaker and building a better business. To learn more about NSA and the resources available to professional speakers, visit nsaspeaker.org. I'm your host, Kate Donovan. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Speakernomics. If you want more bookings, credibility, and connections, your NSA community is waiting for you. Join NSA today. Click the link below and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and download this podcast wherever you listen.